everybody, it's great to be back here again on tomorrow. It's Friday, Parashat Naso. We're also going to celebrate our beautiful holiday, our festival of Chag Shavuot, of receiving Torah, tomorrow night. A very special time. I want to focus on the concept of education and initiation, inauguration. With this week's portion, we see how each of the heads of each tribe, the princes of Israel, bring the same sacrifice. And what they did was called Chanukat HaMizbeach. They're initiating the altar for the first time being used on live in the temple. And this is a fascinating thing, of course, because it leads to the topic of what is really inauguration? What is this whole concept of first time using something? It's a very special thing, and it's something that we should pay attention to, because it's connected to many different areas. In reality, it's really the source of what education is all about, because we see the word Chanukat HaMizbeach, inaugurating or initiating. The altar, it comes from the word in Hebrew, of the root in Hebrew, meaning chanoch, chet nun chaf, meaning to educate. Now, what is the connection of education and bringing something, inaugurating something, bringing something to its first usage? We see right away Rashi brings down one of the first times the word's mentioned, that root is mentioned in the Torah in chapter 14, verse 14 also as well of Genesis. It's also mentioned before regarding Chanoch. As we all know, Chanoch was one of he was the seventh generation from the first man, who was a son of Yerid, and he died at 365 years of age, and he was taken up to the heavens. And his name was called Chanoch. So that's connected to, also have to understand why was he called Chanoch, which is an interesting name. But we also see the name regarding the son of Cain, who kills Hevel, and he builds a city, and he names the city after his son, Chanoch as well. So these things we have to put our mind to understand them. But I want to focus today on the concept. Rashi brings down, as I mentioned before, chapter 14, verse 14 in Genesis, Rashi brings down V'hu Lashon. First also regarding what? It says regarding Abraham. Abraham heard that his nephew was taken captive. And then it says, Vayarek et chanichav yilidei beito. So he armed his chanichav, his soldiers, his young soldiers, his students, those who from his household, and they were 318 of them, and they ran to Dan, all the way up north to Dan. But anyway, the concept, the word chanichav, the same word that's used in this week's portion, Chanukat HaMizbeach, that same root, Rashi explains the root of the word. Rashi says, V'hu lashon atchalat knisat adam. It is the language of the initiation of a person or a vessel, a kli, omanut, of crafts, a vessel of craftsmanship into its purpose that's going to be done in the future. And Rashi brings down a few different verses, and one of them is the verse Chanukat HaMizbeach, initiating the altar in this week's portion. Rashi also brings down before that Chanoch lanar al pi darko, gam ki yaskin lo yaso mimenu, right? Educate a child according to his way. Even when he gets older, he will not turn away from it. So we see this concept of initiation is connected to education, in that when you educate someone, as a child, you want to do it on the onset, educate him in the beginning of his life. It begins right away when he's born, that child, even in the mother's womb. And as that child grows older, he will grow straight and not turn away from his way. So that's very, very important to start it out in the beginning. No, the beginning is a very, very important thing, to do something right from the onset. It doesn't mean we can't rectify something that wasn't done right in the beginning. Of course it can be rectified, but it's much harder. So one of the principles of education and to do something is to do it right from the beginning, not to have to fix it later on. And that's a very important concept that we learn out here regarding education from Rashi in the book of Genesis, again 14, verse 14. Getting back to our portion, the idea of initiating the altar into holiness. So each of the heads of the tribes, the princes of the tribes, wanted to make sure that they are going to bring that first sacrifice. Each one brought the same ingredients, but of course it was their own personal touch they put into it, and it initiated the holiness within the tabernacle through the altars, which is a fascinating understanding in itself. So we see this concept of education and initiation is all connected, and through mention this week's portion of Naso. How do we take that to a further level and try to connect it to the receiving of the Torah? Well, this is just understand that there's a difference between the world that we're living in, the world that the Torah is given to, and then the upper world, the spiritual realm. Of course, the Torah is all-encompassing. God looked in the Torah and He created the world. The Torah obviously is on different levels. There's a Torah in heaven, there's a Torah below on earth. And the purpose of the Torah that was given to us was a Torah that was going to rectify man and bring us to a very, very high spiritual plane and level. And there's a great discourse in the tractate of Shabbat on chapter, on page 88, 89. It's a whole, it's very, I can recommend to read through those pages, dealing with the giving of the Torah and a very beautiful midrashim that explain important foundations of what Torah is all about and why was it given to man. And one of them is Moshe Rabbeinu goes to the heavens, and there's an argument between the angels saying, why is God giving the Torah to man? It should remain up here in the heavens. But Moshe Rabbeinu's claim, God says, answer them. And Moshe Rabbeinu claims, you don't have up there parents to honor. You don't have jealousy up there, that you have murder and stealing and all kinds of things that are rectified. It doesn't exist in the angelic world. Down below on this earth, we need the Torah to rectify, to correct situations, to bring us to high spiritual planes. So therefore, the Torah is something that educates the world, mankind, to bring mankind to a high spiritual realm that will bring us up eventually to that angelic world. But the angelic world is not the world we live in. Eventually, we'll reach there through our great work and service, divine service. We can reach that angelic world. But we have to live in a physical world and cope with all the difficulties. So here, Moshe Rabbeinu won the debate. The Torah was given. It was brought down to this world to rectify us, to be able to rectify all of mankind. Not everyone is able to start out right and initiate and inaugurate their lives in the proper path in the beginning. That's what we head for. That's what education is all about, to do it as early as we can, to try to straighten it out. If you plant a tree, it's going to grow crooked if it's crooked. You got to keep that tree straight. It's much harder to straighten the tree out later. And that is the great lesson of Parashat Naso, means literally, right, to go up. We want to arise ourselves and grow through proper education through the Torah. And that's really what the beauty of the Torah is all about. We see one example in the portion. We see it's really connected to education. And this concept is the oath of the Nazarite oath. What is the Nazarite oath all about? When a person feels that, sometimes he needs something to push him forward, he wants to rise to a higher spiritual plane, and he takes upon the oath of the Nazarite oath. But in reality, the Talmud teaches us that he has to bring a sacrifice, a sin offering. Why? Because at the end of the day, he added on himself additional things that he didn't have to do. He's abstaining from wine, from becoming unclean, has to grow his hair. He's making life harder for himself. We have enough on our plate as it is. So here we see again, you're not an angel. This world, there's enough things to deal with. You don't have to try to take upon yourself higher levels that you weren't commanded to do. So it's a very interesting teaching on education in itself. On the other hand, we see the laws of the sotah, when there's jealousy between the husband and the wife, and he has suspicions, and she has to drink the bitter water and all that in order to clarify, to bring peace in the home. So these are human things that happen all the time. This is what Torah is all about, to cope with these kind of situations. The desert, on the other hand, we were still very pampered. We were walking through the desert. God was giving us our needs, but we're preparing ourselves to enter the land, and God will release us from the incubator, I call, in the desert, of have everything hand delivered to us on a silver platter. He was preparing us for life in the land, to have to work the land and to deal and cope with all the difficulties as human beings we have to cope with. Battles, and all our difficulties in farming and making a living and all those kind of things were things we're going to have to cope with in the future. And the Torah and proper education is the source to rectify all that. That is a great lesson here for Naso, connecting us to both Shabbat and Matan Torah. Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Tovot, Yeshuot V'Nechamot.